Yeah, I just want to follow up on Jonathan's question with respect to real estate and land value. It seems to me that even in a free market, that land prices and land value would increase along with economic growth, generally kind of in the aggregate, because there's, limited supply, obviously.
I think to the extent that there's limited supply, that's true. I don't know that there is limited supply or that we've got to the point where there's limited supply. Now, again, some land will accelerate, it will increase in value because it's better positioned, it's next to a railroad, it's next to, it has some characteristic that makes it more valuable than it was in the past. Because the rail now has a new station and it's close to it, or things like that. But is there? I mean, there's so much land. If you fly over this country, there's so much empty space that I don't know, and there's so much unused land, right? So obviously we don't need it. Now, there are a lot of questions of what would happen in a free market, and I don't have a good answer to that, right? What would happen if the highways were privatized and the railroad was privatized? What roads would be built? What roads wouldn't be built? Would we have the same kind of cities we have today, or would they be different? Would we use more land or would we use less land? Would we consolidate into kind of mixed use downtowns, or would we expand into suburbs? There's a cost of being in suburbs. You'd have to build the roads and the infrastructure. And now you don't have a central authority bearing that cost. So would developers move us in that direction, or would they move us into a downtown? It's not clear to me what the answer to that is. That's the beauty of the market. We don't know exactly what would happen if we truly had a market. If we got rid of zoning and we just let it fly. I mean, you look at Houston, Texas, where there's no zoning, it's gone all over the place. It's spread out, and housing prices don't go up much in Houston, and land prices haven't gone up in Houston because there seems to be almost no end to the amount of land around Houston. It just grows. Suburbia, look at places and countries where they run out of land, so they turn the ocean into land, right? I mean, if you've ever been to Boston, most of downtown Boston is landfill. Most of downtown is landfill. So if you look at the historical pictures of Boston, most of that is the river and the ocean and the kind of swamps that intersect between the two. And swamps are dry landfill, and they built downtown Boston on it. And so that is you can spend that money when seems to be a shortage of land. So you can do landfill this. Now, again, you couldn't do that today. I mean, what about that's changing nature. How dare you, right? There's probably some seaworm that got damaged when they filled in the land to build in, I don't know. So a free market, it would be interesting how it evolved. But yeah, you could imagine a situation where you had a shortage of land. I just don't see it, given how much land there is in the United States. And again, there might be periods of land increasing because it was too expensive to develop land because it's in the desert. Okay, but land prices would then reach a point where it was cheaper to go develop the land in the desert than to build here. And once the land is developed, then the prices might come down. So you might have periods in which it goes up and down and up and down. But over time, I don't think prices would go up that much until there was a real shortage, and it's not clear when that would happen. I mean, look at Las Vegas. I mean, imagine that in other places around the desert. I mean, it's just random that it's there. It's there because the highway went through there. Route 66, I think, went through Vegas. So it was a convenient place, and it was not too far from Colorado River and ultimately the dam, the Boulder Dam. But lots of other places you could do the same thing in a different world.
Okay, so you're basically like you're like providing more supply, like you're saying, like Battery Park or downtown Boston, but also you're like substituting like worse land in some cases to kind of drive the price back down.
Yes. So land that's more expensive to develop, but often it's more expensive to develop initially because the infrastructure is harder to build there. But once it reaches a certain, like Vegas, once it reaches a certain scale, it's easy to grow it. And therefore that would drive down prices in adjacent cities in California, let's say, because Californians can move now to Vegas, whereas it was unthinkable to move to Vegas earlier. So now it's actual competition. Now it's true that you could argue that, so that would put a cap on how far prices would go up. So you could say, look, California is always going to have better weather. So people are going to want to live in California. Now, even in California, there's plenty of land, which is not being used right now. But let's assume you reached a point where land was scarce. Prices would go up, but there'd be a ceiling on how much prices would go up. And that ceiling would be determined on how much people are really willing to pay in order not to be in somewhere like Vegas or for the weather, if you will. Right?
And to begin with, I wonder if I can ask you to capsulize. I know this is difficult. Can I ask you to capsulize your philosophy? What is Randism?
First of all, I do not call it Randism, and I don't like that name. I call it objectivism.
All right.
Meaning a philosophy based on objective reality. Now let me explain it as briefly as I can. First, my philosophy is based on the concept that reality exists as an objective absolute, that man's mind, reason, is his means of perceiving it, and that man needs a rational morality. I am primarily the creator of a new code of morality which has so far been believed impossible, namely a morality not based on faith.
On faith?
Not on faith, not on arbitrary whim, not on emotion, not on arbitrary edict, mystical or social, but on reason, a morality which can be proved by means of logic, which can be demonstrated to be true and necessary.
All right, all right.
Now, may I define what my morality is?
All right.
Because this is merely an introduction. My morality is based on man's life as a standard of value. And since man's mind is his basic means of survival, I hold that if man wants to live on Earth and to live as a human being, he has to hold reason as an absolute, by which I mean that he has to hold reason as his only guide to action, and that he must live by the independent judgment of his own mind, that his highest moral purpose is the achievement of his own happiness, and that he must not force other people, nor accept their right to force him, that each man must live as an end in himself and follow his own rational self-interest.
May I?
All right, before we go on, reminder, please like the show. We've got 163 live listeners right now, 30 likes. That should be at least 100. I figure at least 100 of you actually like the show. Maybe there are like 60 of the Matthews out there who hate it. But at least the people who are liking it, you know, I want to see a thumbs up. There you go. Start liking it. I want to see that go to 100. All it takes is a click of a thing, whether you're looking at this. And you know, the likes matter. It's not an issue of my ego. It's an issue of the algorithm. The more you like something, the more the algorithm likes it. So, you know, and if you don't like the show, give it a thumbs down. Let's see your actual views being reflected in the likes. But if you like it, don't just sit there. Help get the show promoted. Of course, you should also share. And you can support the show at JeronBrooksShow.com/support, or on Patreon or Subscribestar or Locals, and show your support for the work, for the value hopefully you're receiving from this. And of course, don't forget, if you're not a subscriber, even if you just come here to troll, or even if you're here like Matthew to defend Marx, then you should subscribe, because that way you'll know when to show up. You'll know what shows are on, when they're on. You'll get notified, right? So, yes, like, share, subscribe, support. Like, share, subscribe, support. There you go. Easy. Do one or all of those, please.